The Dr. Phil show was running like it always did. Cameras rolling. Audience engaged. The familiar rhythm of introduction, question, response. Dr. Phil had done this thousands of times. Sat across from people carrying secrets, trauma, pain. He'd developed a sense for when someone was about to break. When the truth was close to the surface. But that day, he had no idea what was coming. The guest's name was Rachel. 20 years old. She'd written to the show 6 months earlier. The letter was brief. I need to tell the truth about my childhood. But I'm afraid of what will happen if I do. The producers had reached out. Interviewed her over the phone. Cleared her for the show. But they didn't know the full story. Rachel had been careful. Strategic. She'd revealed just enough to get on stage. But not enough to be stopped. She sat in the guest chair now. Wearing jeans and a simple blouse. Hair pulled back. No makeup. The kind of appearance that said, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to survive this. The audience had applauded when she walked out. Standard greeting. She'd nodded. Sat down. Folded her hands in her lap. Dr. Phil reviewed his notes. Rachel, you contacted us because you said you've been living with a secret your entire life. A secret about your childhood. About who raised you. Can you tell us why you're ready to talk about it now? Rachel's hands tightened. Because I'm tired. I've been tired for 20 years. And if I don't say it now, I never will. Dr. Phil nodded. He'd heard that before. The exhaustion of carrying something too heavy for too long. What is it you need to say? Rachel looked at him. Then at the audience. Then back at Dr. Phil. Everyone thinks I was raised by my parents. John and Patricia Summers. That's what the records say. That's what my birth certificate says. But it's not true. The audience shifted. Confused. Dr. Phil leaned forward slightly. What do you mean it's not true? I mean they didn't raise me. They weren't there. My mother, Patricia, she left when I was 6 months old. Just disappeared. And my father, John, he tried. He really did. But he was deployed. Military. Gone for months at a time. So I wasn't raised by them. Dr. Phil's expression didn't change, but his focus sharpened. Then who raised you, Rachel? And that's when everything stopped. Rachel took a breath. My father's best friend. A man named David. David Chen. He moved into our house when I was a baby. Took care of me when my dad was deployed. Fed me. Changed me. Put me to bed. Taught me to read. Went to my school events. He was there for everything. Every single thing. The audience was silent. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dr. Phil was watching Rachel's face carefully. That sounds like David was a very dedicated family friend. Why is this a secret? Rachel's voice dropped. Because when I was 7 years old, David told me something. He said I couldn't tell anyone he was living with us. That if people knew, they would take me away. That I'd end up in foster care. That I'd never see my dad again. He said it had to be our secret. Just between us. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. The cameras kept rolling, but the energy had shifted. The audience had stopped shifting in their seats. The crew had stopped moving. Everyone was locked in. Dr. Phil set down his note cards. This wasn't scripted territory anymore. Rachel, Dr. Phil said carefully. Why would David tell you that? Why would people take you away if they knew he was caring for you? Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Because David wasn't just my dad's friend. David was the person my dad trusted more than anyone in the world. But David wasn't supposed to be there. Not legally. Not officially. My dad never filed custody papers for him. Never made it legal. David was just there. Living with us. Raising me. And no one knew. Why didn't your father make it legal? Dr. Phil asked. Because David couldn't pass a background check? The studio went ice cold. Dr. Phil's face didn't move, but his entire body language changed. He sat up straighter. His voice became quieter, more controlled. Why couldn't he pass a background check? Rachel looked directly at him. Because 15 years before I was born, David had been convicted of a crime. He served his time. He was released. He rebuilt his life. He and my dad served together. Became brothers. My dad trusted him completely. But legally, David wasn't allowed to be a guardian. Wasn't allowed to be around children unsupervised. So my dad never told anyone. And David raised me in secret. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He stood up. Didn't say anything to Rachel. Just stood. Walked to the edge of the stage where the producers sat. The audience could see him but couldn't hear him clearly. He spoke quietly but firmly. Stop recording. Right now. The red lights on the cameras went off. The audience sat in stunned confusion. Dr. Phil walked back to the stage. But he didn't sit in his chair. He sat in the chair next to Rachel. The guest chair. Eye level with her. Rachel, he said, his voice low enough that only she and the front rows could hear. What was David convicted of? Rachel's voice cracked. Possession. Drugs. When he was 19. He made a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. And it followed him for the rest of his life. But Dr. Phil, he never hurt me. Not once. He was the only parent I ever really had. He was kind. He was patient. He taught me right from wrong. He was there when no one else was. Dr. Phil's jaw was tight. Where is David now? He died. 3 years ago. Cancer. And when he died, I realized I'd spent my entire life keeping his secret. Protecting him. But also protecting my dad. Because if anyone found out what my dad had done, letting a convicted felon raise his daughter, he could have lost everything. His career. His reputation. Maybe even custody of me retroactively. So I stayed quiet. Even at David's funeral. Even when people asked me who he was to me. I said family friend. Never said the truth. Never said he was my dad in every way that mattered. Dr. Phil sat back. Processing. The audience was completely silent. Watching this private conversation unfold. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I came here today, she continued, because I can't carry it anymore. I can't keep pretending David was just some guy who helped out. He raised me. He loved me. He sacrificed everything for me. And he died thinking I was ashamed of him. That I couldn't tell people the truth about who he was to me. And I wasn't ashamed. I was scared. But he didn't know that. He died thinking I was ashamed. Dr. Phil looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the producers. Bring me the legal team. Now. 2 producers moved quickly off stage. The audience watched in confusion. Rachel looked at Dr. Phil. What are you doing? I'm making sure, Dr. Phil said, that before we continue this conversation, we understand the legal implications of what you're saying. Because Rachel, what you're describing is complicated. Your father made a choice that, legally, was questionable. But you're an adult now. David has passed. And I want to make sure that telling this story doesn't create problems for you or your father that can't be fixed. Rachel's face showed relief and fear in equal measure. I don't want to hurt my dad. He did what he thought was right. He trusted David. And he was right to trust him. I understand, Dr. Phil said. But we need to be smart about this. The legal team arrived. Whispered conversations happened off camera. The audience waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, Dr. Phil stood. Walked back to his original seat. Gestured for the cameras to turn back on. The red lights returned. Dr. Phil looked directly at the camera. At America watching from home. What you're about to hear, he said, is a story about love, sacrifice, and the complicated reality of family. Rachel has agreed to share her truth. And I want to be clear, this is not an endorsement of breaking the law. But it is an acknowledgement that sometimes, people make impossible choices in impossible situations. And sometimes those choices come from love. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. He turned back to Rachel. Tell us about David. Not the conviction. Not the secret. Tell us who he was to you. And Rachel did. For the next 20 minutes she told stories. David teaching her to ride a bike. David staying up all night when she had the flu. David attending every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered. David working 3 jobs to make sure she had what she needed. David never asking for recognition. Never asking for thanks. Just showing up. Every single day. The audience was crying. The crew was crying. Dr. Phil's eyes were wet, but his voice stayed steady. You said David died thinking you were ashamed of him, Dr. Phil said. But Rachel, you're here now. Telling his story. Telling the world who he really was. That's not shame. That's honor. Rachel nodded. I know. But I wish I'd done it while he was alive. I wish he'd known that I wasn't ashamed. That I was just scared. What would you say to him now? Dr. Phil asked. If he were here? Rachel looked directly at the camera. As if David might somehow see this. Hear this. I'd say thank you. Thank you for every meal. Every bedtime story. Every hug. Every moment you chose me even though you didn't have to. Even though it was dangerous for you. Even though it meant living in the shadows. You were my dad. In every way that mattered. And I'm not ashamed of you. I never was. I was just afraid of losing you. And then I did anyway. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. From backstage, one of the producers walked onto the stage. Handed Dr. Phil a folder. Dr. Phil opened it. Read quickly. Then looked at Rachel. Rachel, while we were off camera, my team made some calls. We contacted your father. He's watching right now. From his home. And he wants to say something to you. A screen lowered from the ceiling. And there, on video call, was John Summers. Rachel's father. 62 years old. Military uniform visible in the background. He was crying. Rachel, he said, his voice breaking through the speakers. I've spent 28 years afraid you'd hate me for what I did. For letting David raise you. For putting you in that situation. But baby, David was the best man I ever knew. He made a mistake when he was a kid. A stupid mistake. But he paid for it. And he spent the rest of his life trying to be better. To do better. And he did. He was a better father to you than I could have been. He loved you more than anyone I've ever seen love a child. And I'm not ashamed of him either. I'm grateful. I'm grateful he was there when I couldn't be. Rachel stood. Walked closer to the screen. Dad, I don't hate you. I never could. You trusted the right person. You did the right thing. And David. David gave me everything. John nodded through his tears. He did, baby. He really did. Dr. Phil stood. Walked to Rachel. Handed her a small card from his pocket. This is the contact for a family therapist who specializes in complicated grief and non-traditional family structures. You and your father need to talk. Really talk. Not about the legality. About the love. About David's legacy. About healing. Rachel took the card. Held it like a lifeline. Dr. Phil turned to the camera. David Chin couldn't be here today. But his love was. In every word Rachel spoke. In every memory she carries. And that's what family really is. Not paperwork. Not legality. It's showing up. Every single day. For someone who needs you. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The show ended. But Rachel's journey didn't. She and her father started therapy together. Started talking about David openly. Started honoring the man who'd raised her in secret but loved her in full view. 3 months later, Rachel sent Dr. Phil a photo. It was taken at a small ceremony. Just her and her father. At David's grave. They'd placed a new headstone. It read, David Chen. Father. Hero. Forever loved. Underneath, in smaller letters. Some families are chosen. Some love defies paper. This one did both. Dr. Phil kept that photo on his desk. A reminder that sometimes the most important stories are the ones people are too afraid to tell. Until they're not. Until they find the courage to say, this was my family. Unconventional. Complicated. Illegal, maybe? But real. And love doesn't need permission to matter. David Chen raised a daughter who wasn't his by blood or by law. But by choice. Every single day. And in the end, that's the only thing that counts.